think that we forgot what got us here in the first place.
Let's talk about something important. Are they all here?
All but one.
Well, I'm going anyway. Let's talk about something important.
What am I talking about? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. If we look around, there are a lot of folks over the last 2, 3, 4 years that got into the sports card and collectibles hobby that are no longer involved. They have gotten out, or they just slowed way down. And why is that? I've kind of contemplated that myself, and we talk a lot about macroeconomic stuff. We talk a lot about just financial stuff in general on this particular channel, because that plays a lot into this. This is a hobby that's gotten very expensive over time, especially over the last 3 to 4 years. New product, buying singles, box breaks, buying vintage cards. All of it has moved up in price. Some of it's come down over the last little bit, but for the most part, the hobby has become very expensive. And I was thinking about this because I switched my strategies around as I got back in 2018, buying, selling, and this and that, trading. And it sucks because there's been hobby friends that I've had that I've met making content that are no longer really with us, and I don't talk to them. I don't talk to them every day the same way that I used to. The biggest example of this is Brad, the comeback card investor, one of my buddies, and I still do text him from time to time, and we keep up and all that, but it's not the same as when you're both in it doing it together, and it's whether you're making content or if you are buying and selling cards, or you're collecting a specific set, or you're collecting a certain niche, football card or Stranger Things cards or whatever it is, and you have that thing in common, and it really sucks when you lose that. It made me also think too, just as I was talking, my friend Ryan McClanahan, I was just on his channel, History Through Cardboard, or History Through Cards. Great channel. Ryan is a sports card, really a trading card historian. But I know that a few years ago, he lost one of his best buddies, passed away. That was basically that person for him, to where, they had that in common. They were doing the shows, they were collecting the same sorts of things, vintage cards. And when you lose that person, man, it's a big void. And I feel like we've gone kind of through a little bit of a mix of this, over the last little bit. So when this sort of thing happens, it makes me think about, why did I get back in? Because I think self-reflection is always great. A lot of times people are outward. They react outwardly, to where they're like, oh, look at what this person's doing wrong, or look at what they're doing. It's not me. I'm not the problem, or I'm not doing anything wrong. It's them. They're all the problem. But self-reflection is really important. Actual self-reflection, not BS self-reflection where people are, just talking like they are, but they're really not. Actual self-reflection, being self-aware of yourself, is critical in life, in my opinion.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
And so, I look at this, and for me, the big nostalgia is the 80s and the 90s. My parents got divorced when I was 11. And so a lot of my best years that I can remember, my childhood years, were from the age of 7 to 11. And that's 1986 to 1992. And I had some also fun years from 92 to 95 with my buddies and those sorts of things. I didn't have some horrible childhood, so I'm not going to paint it that way. But when I look at my collection and what it started with and how it's evolved, there's a lot of things in my collection that just tie me to my childhood. I always joke, I'm a huge New Orleans Saints fan, and I always joke about Bobby Hebert. And we talk about too with high dollar cards and long-term buys and this and that and whatever. This was $15 starting lineup, but it's got a card in it. But this reminds me of when I was an 8, 9-year-old kid. And of course you look on the back and you've got Thurman Thomas and Rice and some of the other ones that you used to collect, Warren Moon. I was fortunate, a viewer sent me this to Dustin, signed from Bobby Hebert. This is the sort of thing that you kind of dream about as a content creator. You never think that this would happen. When I started my channel, you have 0 subscribers, you have 3 subscribers, like your wife, your parents, But the fact that a viewer actually sent me this, and I've gotten a lot of these sorts of things over time, Saints cards. Someone sent me a Jim Mora signed card, and it's just unbelievable the doors that have opened thanks to the channel. And before I actually continue on, big thank you to Veriswap, today's video sponsor. Veriswap, for all of those of us that, we might have a lot of cards, we don't always have a lot of cash. The cash plus trade element of Veriswap is very cool, very easy to upload your cards on there. And then all of a sudden you can take little shots. You can, hey, I'll trade you this and I'll add cash. And it's a really cool tool that's different that you don't really see out there. That the app functions very, very well. So definitely try out Veriswap. A few weeks ago, I bought a few of these. And if you're my age, 42 or around there, you know what this is. This is Mad Balls going back to 1980, 87, 88. I think they're from 88, 89. But these were the jam. And I've always wanted to find kind of a complete set of these in box. And I paid $75 for this, actually about 3 of them. So, people might think like, my God, you are crazy. Who would pay $75 for this? But the memory that I get when I look at this and I see this sitting in a Kmart or a Walmart, it gives that dopamine rush, that adrenaline, and I've got quite a few of those things. And it really, I think, honestly, for my self-care, it just makes me happier. It just makes me happier to have stuff like this laying around. So going back to our why, I was watching another content creator that I like, Mangini Collection, John Mangini. Him and I have gone back and forth over time, over different issues. We agree on some things, we don't agree on other things. But that's how the world turns. That's the way that it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to agree on everything. But I watched a video of his a few weeks ago, and this was a video that popped up on my feed, and it was from a year or 2 years ago. And it was really interesting, and I can't remember the title of the video. I'll see if I can find it. But basically, he was talking with his parents, and he was talking baseball with his dad, and talking about different players, and who was this guy good? Was that guy good? And it was funny because as I was watching that, and then I watched the videos that he puts out where he's talking about cards and the history of this particular player and the what was going on during the time when the set came out. It was cool because it gave you kind of a behind the scenes of the why, kind of how Mangini became that way. And look, I don't know John, so he might say like, no, you're an idiot. That has nothing to do with why I collect baseball cards. That's just the takeaway that I got when I watched this video. There's, a baseball historian, there that, and then also his father is that way as well. So that's kind of a connection piece, father-son connection that has then kind of parlayed into baseball cards, which I think a lot of people, unfortunately, I don't have that with my dad to where we had that card and that sports connection. The only sports connection we had was crying about the Saints blowing a second half lead in the 80s. That was the sports connection that we have. And that's probably why I have such a huge pull towards the New Orleans Saints, is because my dad, that's the one sport that dad followed and that we watched together was the New Orleans Saints. And so when I look at baseball card collectors and vintage card collectors, and a lot of my channel is between the age of, really most of it's between 35 and 75 in the 80s. That's really, and it's mostly males, it's 97% males, 3% beautiful ladies that are watching the channel. Most of these people, they've got, if we're talking about 70s, 80s, they've got, 50s nostalgia.
Flavor that has never been equaled. Coca-Cola is popular with everyone, which makes it ideal when you're expecting guests. Now that's true whether it's a casual gathering like this one,
or it's 60s nostalgia.
What's the pitch, Rabbit?
The greatest news in sports, Sam. There's 200 free baseball trading cards on Post cereals.
Or 70s nostalgia.
Baseball cards free from Kellogg's. Hi, I'm Ernie Banks. Inside these specially marked packages of Kellogg's Corn Flakes, you get one of these free 3D baseball cards.
Or it's 80s, 90s nostalgia where I am.
Password. Don't fake the funk on a nasty dunk.
ID? You're early.
But I'm ready.
Then prove it.
And then there's some that probably early 2000s and 2000s nostalgia as well. So this is the stuff that really drives everything. Unless you were somebody that got into the hobby over the last few years, and really the only connection piece was that volatility, between pricing and being able to flip easily between 2019 and 2021. And unfortunately, that was not a sustainable thing. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at that, that was not a sustainable long-term deal. Now, maybe some would hope we need something in between there a little bit, and we do, I think. Look, it's not to say there's not flipping opportunities at all times. It's just gotten a lot harder. It was just incredibly easy to do it at that point. And so if you were somebody that really didn't have any sort of a connection and it was more just a business, a transactional business, then it's not really a hobby for you. It's more of a business. And then depending on how you run your business or, however it unfolds for you, you might get out because there's just not that tie-in in the same way that folks that maybe collected something as a kid, they can go back to that thing that ties them into it. And collecting cards or collecting collectibles, it doesn't have to be a massive collection. We kind of joke. I mean, there's, collectors, and then there's always kind of the extreme where it's like hoarding, and everyone always thinks of the show Hoarders, where there's literally people that have their house full of stuff and there's like 8 dead cats in the freezer or whatever. And the show's going sideways. They've got to bulldoze the house. I think there's a lot of people that are like mini hoarders. I consider myself kind of, I've got it contained to one area of the house. I'm a mini hoarder, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Of course, it's got a negative connotation to it because of the show and because, you don't want to collect to where it impacts your living, to where you literally can't breathe because there's so much stuff. But that's extremes. We're talking about extremes here. I just wanted to open up this conversation. I know I went on a little bit of a rant here, but I think it's always a good reminder as what got you here in the first place. And a lot of times your tribe that you find, it might evolve over time. The tribe when you first got in might be different than the tribe you have now. And that tribe might be different than the tribe you have in 5 or 10 years from now. Rob, sports card therapist, he calls it the wolf pack, and they've got their own wolf pack. The wolf pack can evolve over time. Some people are not going to stay in, and that's perfectly okay. Or they might stay in, but it's just on a very limited basis. A lot of us have life things. Life things happen. We had on my wife's side, we had a death in the family today, unfortunately. And it wasn't shocking in the sense that this is a person that had health issues for a long period of time, but has overcome these things over and over and over. And he's still relatively young, and he passed away today. So it just kind of like hits you smack in the face. It's like, enjoy what you're doing, whatever that is. If it's this hobby, another hobby, and don't feel compelled that you have to, be some sort of a superstar at all times in any particular thing. Just do whatever you can do. But the big thing is, and again, when I talk about the mad balls that I've got over here, or I've got the Bobby Hebert starting lineup, you should have things that you look at it and you're like, I remember those days. Those were good days, and I think that is really the fun of what drives most of what we're doing here. So, all right, guys, I won't keep on going. We will cut it short. I'm at 13 minutes, which is a long video for me. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.